Good afternoon. I'm doing this presentation on behalf of one of my colleagues at the National AIDS Council in South Africa, and who's Kerry Mangold. And I want to just say at the outset that this is a very new program, and we were surprised that it was accepted for presentation here. But yeah, because I guess there's very little of this kind of work happening in our part of the world. You know, there might be one or two lessons arising out of this, so I'll head straight on that. So the first point we'd like to make is that we're very fortunate in South Africa to have a liberal, very progressive constitution, including you know, the right language and the right tone on sexual orientation. However, sex work, as I think is well known, is criminalised in terms of our Sexual Offences Act and other municipal bylaws. But in spite of a strong human rights culture in the country, sex workers experience high levels of human rights violations, with regular cases being reported in the media and in the sex worker community. Lots of arrests, but very little prosecution. I guess that's a story all over the world. Sex workers experience a disproportionate burden of HIV in South Africa, with extremely high rates. We'll have more precision on these data in a study that's just been completed in the three big cities of Johannesburg, Cape Town, and Durban. But we can say with a fair amount of certainty that the rates that we have are similar to the rates that Francis had described in Zimbabwe, you know, upwards of 50 or 60%. In the presentation, in the paper that Linda Gale Becker presented 2 days ago, the new estimates, which I think are better estimates of the contribution of sex workers, clients, and partners to the overall rate of new infections in South Africa. So we estimate about somewhere between 6 and 11% of new infections are in our communities. For the first time, we have completed a size estimation study, and our first estimates are that there are in the region of 150,000 sex workers in South Africa. Despite all of this, we've been slow to address sex workers, both in respect of prevention, treatment, and human rights. Well, I think that's really the kind of the problem we've had in South Africa, is that the general view has been that there isn't an especially high transmission or intensity of HIV in any particular population because we have this generalized epidemic. And you know, we're realizing now that that this was a flawed view, and that not only in the sex worker community but also in other key populations, the rates are quite different from that of the general population. And we did have to think anew in the last year about how to segment our population of new infections and tackle them with more precision. Fortunately, we have a reasonably good starting point in the National Strategic Plan, which is very firm and strong on the importance of providing treatment and prevention services for sex workers, clients, and partners. It laid the basis for doing this work rapidly. In a way, the whole point of this presentation is that we're able to, we were very slow for 20 years, but have been able to move rapidly in the last 12 months. And that was a key factor. You know, there wasn't a long process to discuss what has to be done. That was spelled out in the National Strategic Plan. We were also able to move fairly quickly in a matter of weeks to have more detail when it came to sex workers in respect of prevention, care and treatment. And I'm happy to say that you know, the approach is to get it right on the rights front. But also this process was kicked off by the first ever national symposium that brought sex workers together under the direction of sex worker organizations and organizations providing support services such as SWET, which led to this process. That extensive discussion over a few days then led to a simple plan to convert a good idea into action. You know, we'd like to say at this stage that we don't think the plan is perfect. It has all the right elements, but there was a strong feeling that you know, it would be good to start the program, roll it out, scale it up, and then we'll learn more about what to do and how to do it. So the program got a big boost from our funding application to the Global Fund, which is really funding most of the scale-up that we're talking about here, but also government funding from the National AIDS Council, which I represent here, and increasingly funding from PEPFAR. The Global Fund money flows through the National AIDS Council, which manages the country coordinating mechanism, and through a principal recipient called NACOSA. I believe our colleagues from NACOSA are here, onward granting to 18 local NGOs. SWET, which is well known to many of you, is the kind of lead sub-recipient, because that's really where all the work over 20 years has been done, and that's the core of the program that's been scaled up here. But as I said earlier, PEPFAR is also running programs. They also fund a clinic for sex workers in the Hillbrow in Johannesburg, which is an important learning site for many of our ideas about how to deliver health services. And the Department of Health and the National AIDS Council contribute financially to different components of this program. This is the model on which the national program is structured. I won't dwell on it. It's available on our website. You can look at the plan. But we think that that if we implement all these component parts, then you know, that'll be a comprehensive response, not just dealing with one or two components of it. Often there's a tendency to do that. I mentioned the PEPFAR portfolio. One of the things that PEPFAR has funded, the CDC has funded, is a study of prevalence, knowledge, attitudes, and we'll have results of those quite soon. I was disappointed not to have them here to present, because I've seen the results, and I'm sure, Francis, you would have liked to see what the rates are in Johannesburg, Cape Town, and Durban. But that's not to be today. This is just a visual description of where some of the programs are, and as testing is a critical part of any HIV program in South Africa, you know, it's a big part of this program. A little more detail here in respect of the Global Fund funded program, which is in a way the program that is overseen by the National AIDS Council but implemented by NGOs. So as I said earlier, we're working in all 9 provinces of South Africa with about 60 sites now, with 18 sub-recipients. And it's a classic peer education, peer motivator, what we, is the term we actually use, program. We had a lot of support from the India sex worker program, and I'll mention one or two people later. And I think the main lesson we learned, which I'm happy that we learned it before we really launched the program and not after, was that unless this is truly owned and belongs to sex workers, you know, it really won't have the salience and the chemistry, the ownership that such a program needs. Governments can't do this kind of work. They can fund it, and they should, but implementation is another matter. So this is really, I guess, the main slide to show that in a matter of 12 months, in many ways 6 months really, from as of October 2013, we now reach 16,000 sex workers in the program. We expect at the end of the next 6 months to reach 32,000 sex workers, and that makes up about 22% of the sex worker population. So over time, we expect to then, you know, aim much higher with reaching 70, 80, or 90% of sex workers with this program. So in conclusion, then, what are some of the lessons learned? The inclusion of key populations as a focus in the National Strategic Plan gives a solid grounding, or has given a solid grounding and support to the success of a sex worker program that it's national, multi-sectoral, comprehensive and coordinated. Even in a country where sex work is criminalised, a national unified response is still possible. The existence and acceptance of a number of local projects run by NGOs in different parts of the country enabled coordinated scale-up to occur in a short period of time. Sex worker organizations must play a leading role from the beginning, and informed discussion amongst key policymakers is critical to legitimize the need for sex worker-specific HIV programs. I'd just like to acknowledge the people who really were behind this presentation, forced me to stand in front of you in a big hall. Kerry, who did the presentation, wasn't able to come to this meeting. Sally Shackleton and Maria Stacey from SWET. Koli Buthelezi, who is national coordinator for Sisonke, the sex workers movement, who I hope is in the audience. I was expecting her to be here, because she might be able to answer some of the questions better than I will be able to. Marita de Vos, Maureen van Wyk from NACOSA, which is the principal recipient managing this program. Helen Sava from CDC, the US government key populations lead. Dr. Jana from Sanagaji. So with that, I'll leave you with that quote, and thank you. Thank you very much.